Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox, and welcome to a new year. There's going to be a lot of changes this year. We're going to have a new American president, probably. We're going to have a new Prime Minister, probably. And we're going to have a new leader of the SNP, probably. Things might not change after all. Who knows? However, we need to work hard. We need to make it the year in which change happens. And I've come up with a little saying, something I read, but I've sort of slightly altered just to make it scan. And that's, show them the door in 24. And let's get rid of the current crop, who are so damaging with everything they do. Now, most likely, of course, it will be Kate Forbes who takes over. And that will that will lead to a lot of changes. Certainly the change of direction in many policies, the booting out of the Greens, the destruction of the Butte House Agreement. There'll be change of personnel for sure. The likes of Shona Robertson will be out. Humza Yousaf will be out. Fergus Ewing will be in. You know, there's going to be those changes. And there'll be a lot of policy changes. But it does seem that there's one area of policy that may not change so much. And that is the pretendy embassies. For it seems that even Kate seems to be wavering on keeping them, which is very unusual. Let's take a look. So, Kate Forbes admits that the SNP's overseas offices promote Scotland as separate to the UK, which of course it isn't. It's these little pretendy embassies filled with the hangers-on, the friends and the family of senior SNP officials, of senior politicians, all their little coterie where they're handing off these highly paid, very nice positions of laziness, really. There's not much work going on, but they're paying them all this money to go abroad, live these little lives and enjoy themselves, all, of course, at the public purse. And nobody knows why. They don't have diplomatic status. They have no standing. They're not diplomatic corps. They're not Home Office. They're not Foreign Office. They're not Cabinet Office. No one else should be speaking to foreign dignitaries. They can often be having conversations and discussing things that go against official United Kingdom policy, which I would say at that point makes them traitors. There is that possibility. This is why I've always said we need our equivalent of a Logan Act. But it's an awful waste of money, and she seems to think it's a good idea. Oh, dearie me, Kate, here's me thinking you were sane. Seriously, you're achieving nothing with it. It's a terrible waste. And yet you seem to think that making Scotland separate from the United Kingdom is in some way making Scotland better. It merely shows the weakness of Scotland. It's not part of any of the international bodies because it's not a nation state. It's not a sovereign state. And so why would any of these people want to talk to you? Whereas if you were there as part of a delegation from the United Kingdom, you would have an extra layer of kudos. There'd be a shine on your armour, as it were. And you would be able to then deal with these people on a state level. It seems an odd choice to make. Anyway, the nigh on £8 million a year network of pretendy embassies are using soft power, whatever that is, to promote Scottish Government values. Well, one only has to look at the values that's currently being promoted to see how bad they are. The endangerment of women and children, the destruction of the NHS, the destruction of education. These, apparently, are Scottish Government values. I don't think anyone is going to be impressed with them, watching what was a world-leading education descend to third world levels, for example, having the worst waiting lists imaginable in entirety of Scottish history. Not good. And allowing women, vulnerable women particularly, to be exposed and put in danger by mentally ill men, and allowing those same mentally ill men to expose themselves in changing rooms in front of young girls. Again, not a good look for a party that claims it wants to push Scottish Government values. And I'm surprised that someone who is as religious, shall we say, and who's self-claimingly ethical as Kate Forbes is going along with this. Seems very, very weird and at odds with her beliefs, I think. Anyway, we'll have a look. MSPs at Holyrood recently heard from 3 of the leading lights in the SNP's so-called Foreign Legion, as they described how they use soft power to promote brand Scotland across the globe, because nobody apparently has ever heard of Scotland before. The network of 9 overseas offices has been given a bumper budget of more than £7.8 million next year. I mean, well, they're cutting mental health, they're cutting the NHS, they're cutting the money to the councils, they're cutting the money to all the services people need. But hey, we're upping the budget for the foreign pretendy embassies because, you know, our chums, they need a pay rise. Some suspect the plush offices in some of the world's major capital cities, dubbed pretendy embassies, are a key part of this long-term effort to try to portray Scotland as ready-made state in waiting. Ready-made failed state, surely. And they're saying it's already semi-detached from the UK, which of course it is not. It is no different today than it was 300 years ago. Kate Forbes, one of the most influential figures in the SNP, did little to correct this impression when she said, obviously, I would not ask you to comment on political matters before commenting on political matters, because she added that it was fascinating to see people relate to Scotland as an entity in and of itself, rather than one that is subsumed within the wider United Kingdom, in the same way that Northern Ireland, Wales and England are. Indeed, Scotland has more powers than England, which is a very strange position to be in. England, for example, does not have its own government. Her comments came at a meeting of the Constitution, Europe, External Affairs and Culture Committee shortly before Christmas. It heard from Chris Thompson, the outgoing head of Washington DC office. A nice little job. They're advertising for it, $83,000 a year plus expenses, including a home, fully subsidised, drinks budget, restaurant budget. Lovely life. Do that for a few years. Sweet. All paid for by the taxpayer. I mean, can't see a doctor, can't see a dentist, can't get cancer treatment for your children. But hey, somebody has a wanker they know who's on a good screw in America for no reason whatsoever. Because, of course, the UK embassy can do everything. And indeed will do everything. Because that man's got no power. He can't issue passports. He can't arrange legal representation. What's his purpose? There isn't one. None at all. Anyway, they all said that their role involved the use of soft power through cultural events such as Burn suppers, St Andrew's Day's dinners, concerts and ministerial visits in order to give a positive impression of brand Scotland. And by ministerial visits, they mean Air Miles Angus flying around the globe, pretending that he is important and pretending that he's got actual power, when all he does is travel around the globe and shaking hands with minor officials several layers down the food chain. I mean, they're not leaders. They're not even the assistants to leaders. They're the junior secretary to the assistant to the assistant to the senior secretary of a junior minister. That's how far down they are. They may as well just be talking to the chefs, the cooks, the cleaners, the chauffeurs, in much the same way as Sturgeon did at COP27. But hey, get the photo ops in. Get the photo ops in. SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown also brought up the subject of politics, despite the fact that civil servants are supposed to be scrupulously neutral. Fat chance in Scotland. The civil service in Scotland is the SNP service. We see that with all the things they're doing. He described recent attempts by the Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack and Foreign Secretary David Cameron to stop the Scottish Government setting its own agenda on foreign affairs, because it cannot have a foreign affairs. It does not have an agenda. It is not a nation state. And everything must go through the Foreign Office, the Cabinet Office. Those are the only two. Possibly you could argue the Home Office if it's international relating home. They are the only three parts of the government that should have any doings with foreign nationals, foreign governments. And that, again, I push the issue, but I think we need a Logan Act. And anyone who deals with a foreign government outside of those particular prescribed groups, it's treason. It's simple as that. It's treason. And you lock them up and you give them 20, 30 years for treason. It only happened once. And wouldn't it be a shame to see Air Miles locked up, holding the bars, running his little tin cup up and down the bars? I'd love to see it. There's quite a few of them actually, isn't there? You'd have to build a whole jail just for the SNP, I think. Anyway, Mr. Thompson, whose office is based at the British Embassy in Washington and whose successor will earn £83,000 a year basic salary, plus expenses, as I say, plus all the subsidies, said things can happen at home and in the political sphere that will have an impact on what we do. But as officials, our job is to get the work done. But you don't have a job. There is no job for you. What job do you do? Everything you do is made up work, because the real shit that happens is done by the British Embassy. Do you think some Scot abroad is going, oh, I've lost my passport, I've been mugged and lost my passport? Is he going to go to the Scottish office and ask somebody there who has no ability to issue a passport to help him? Or is he going to go to the British Embassy and say, this has happened? And the British Embassy will issue a temporary passport. Which do you think is the real job here? So what is this guy on 83,000 a year, this embassy worker on 83,000 a year doing? Oh well, yeah, come over and we'll have some haggis, which I may point out is actually illegal in the United States. So your burn suppers in the United States are going to be a poor thing, aren't they? Haggis being illegal and all. Unless they're going to sneak it in the diplomatic bag. But hey, it'll have to come in on the UK diplomatic bag, because Scotland doesn't have diplomats, doesn't have the diplomatic corps. Just doesn't exist in Scotland, because not a nation state. Anyway, he said the situation is really positive. Well, like Mandy Rice Davis, he would say that, wouldn't he? What else is he going to say? Who cares? They're all liars. They're all absolute liars. And they all claim that they're doing this very, very important job of representing Scotland. But they're not. They're not. And if they're highlighting the things they've done for Scotland, people are just going to look at it and go, God, if that's how bad it is, I want nothing to do with you, sunshine, and walk away. Anyway, I shall stop there, round off and come up. But poor old Kate, you need to change your mind on that one, love. It's going to end in tears. Now, there is 2.5 years or so until the next Holyrood elections. So you're more or less stuck with the SNP until then. You've got to get rid of the current leadership because they are just so bad. And the only one that can take over, that may do anything that isn't entirely terrible, is Kate Forbes. But even then, you can see she's still a bit weird if she thinks that the Scottish embassies are still a good idea. Terrible waste of money, and yet achieving so very little, doing nothing effectively, because there is nothing there for them to do in any kind of real, meaningful way. And if they want to promote Scotland, all that money and all those people all around the world, just get hold of an advertising agency. They'll do it for a lot less. That's that. Never mind. Now, of course, we've got the general election coming up this year, possibly in May, a few months away, or possibly October. Either one. It's going to be devastating for the SNP. There's an even bigger poll. We're going to do a story later today, an even bigger poll about that. It will, I think, undoubtedly lead to the end of Alibaba, and so she will undoubtedly take over. But worse for them is that loss of all that money from Westminster, and that is why we can show them the door in 24, because we can make them bankrupt. Whenever the election is, whenever the general election comes, tactical voting is the key. And you can do it. And you can get every single one of them out. I think there's only 3 seats where they had more than 50% of the vote. It's possible. And if you can whittle them down, you only have 3 left at Westminster. I mean, they are gone. And they just don't have any money. And the entire party will implode through bankruptcy. So it can be done. It is up to the voters. And especially South Aberdeen. Get him out. Beryl needs to go. He's desperate to take over as leader. And yet we did the poll the other day that showed that Alex Salmond is more likely to become leader than Beryl. And Salmond, of course, isn't even in the party. That's how bad his options are. So let's get Beryl out. Let's go and make him do a proper day's work. Can't think of anything he can do. Anyway, this has dragged on far too long. First one of the year. I've yabbered on. Time to stop and move on to the next subject. Thanks very much for watching. Till next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will talk to you later. Bye.